We may be viewing or listening to us not only in America, but also in the world. It's Monday, November 14th, 2022. We are at the tail end of the most important national midterm election season in decades. Recent international news has informed us that the world is concerned about this most crucial time in American history. This program is Issues and Answers, and I am your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. Tell your friends and neighbors that we can be viewed via smart television, smartphone, or nearly any dumb computer. All that is required is that you type in your browser, WCEG talkradio.com. Then click enter, and on the next screen, click the live stream tab. Smart TVs are easy. Just click on the YouTube icon and search for WCEG Network. Now, WCEG stands for Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Our programming goal is to leave you more informed and more empowered than you were before you tuned in. Our motto, we speak life into the community. Now, you may like us on Facebook, and there you can view us live and text in comments and questions. And you can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Now, let me tell you a little something here. The topics and opinions of Issues and Answers are those of the host and my guest. They are not the opinions of WCEG management, so don't harass management. These shoulders will handle your vitriol or your admiration. Bring it on. This is my show, and these are the words and opinions of both me and my guest. So open your ears, open your minds, and get ready to learn. Please take notes and watch replays of this program on YouTube at any time. I'd like to welcome my guests, Mr. Rodney Jordan and Ms. Daun Hester. We're going to give you a little brief bio of both. Brief bio of both, but not as brief as you might expect. These are people who have done a lot in the community of Virginia, and I'm sure that their impact has impact nationally. First, Mr. Jordan. Mr. Rodney Jordan is a digital inclusion visionary and technology consultant. He is the Chief Community Engagement Officer for McKinley Meggingson Group and Director of its McKinley Meggingson Melanet Center for Digital Inclusion. Mr. Jordan has served on the Norfolk City, Virginia School Board since 2012. From 2015 to 2018, he was the he was the board chair. From 2020 to 2021, he was the vice chair. In 2019 to 2020, Mr. Jordan served as the Virginia School Boards Association president. Mr. Jordan has served since 2014 as the co-chair of the Virginia State School Board Task Force on Students in Schools in Challenging Environments, among other positions at the state and regional level. In 2020, the National School Board Association President Charlie Wilson and the NSBA Secretary Treasurer Frank Henderson, co-chairs of the Dismantling Institutional Racism and National Advisory Committee. Mr. Jordan is a member of the Consortium of State School Boards Association, Urban Boards Alliance Advisor. Additionally, Mr. Jordan is the 2022 to 2023 Executive Committee member for the Council of Great City Schools Board of Directors. It was in 2020 that he became the recipient of the Benjamin Elijah Mays Lifetime Achievement Award from the Council of Urban Boards of Education and the 2020 inaugural recipient of the Mary Peak Excellence in Education Equity Award from the Virginia Department of Education. Are you listening? In 2015, he was recognized by the Virginia School Boards Association as its inaugural Education Advocate of the Year. an award created to recognize board members who have demonstrated significant and outstanding leadership, commitment, and contribution to public education that has had an impact on their region and the Commonwealth, and who have shown active involvement in local, state, and federal advocacy on behalf of their division. He is among the premier recipients of the influencers, and innovators of the Internet and Technology Award given by the Marketing and Opportunities in Black Entertainment Association. Mr. Jordan and his work has been cited in several publications, including the New York Times, Black Enterprise, Emerge, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Newsweek, and USA Today, for his accomplishments in bringing business and culture to the internet. Internet Business has named Mr. Jordan to its top 75 power list in Hampton Roads from the list inception from 2011 through 2022. In keeping with his family tradition of civic involvement, Mr. Jordan has served as convener of Norfolk Digital Inclusion Advisory Board, Chair, Norfolk State University Science and Technology Academians on the Road to Success, that's STARS Plus, Advisory Board, Board member of the Hampton Roads Workforce Development Board, Executive Committee member and Youth Council Chair, member of the Board of Commissioners of the Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority, 2002 to 2009, and former Vice Chair, and drop down here to the Hampton Roads Committee of 200 plus men, past Vice Chair of Economic Justice, the Board of Directors of the Norfolk Sister City Association, the member of Second Chance Tidewater Reentry Council, President Park Place Civic League, and lends himself to a variety of community-based activities when he has time. Wow. Mr. Jordan is a proud father of 2 adult daughters and is this year to be honored with the role of grandparent to a wonderful grandson. Very short bio. Next, Miss Daun Hester. These are stellar folks, boy. I'm just so happy to just read their bios. Miss Hester is a lifelong resident of Norfolk, Virginia, and has committed her life to serving her community, city, and the Commonwealth. She grew up in the 5 Points area where she graduated from Norview High. She returned to her family home after college to begin a career in education, her role as a servant leader. She currently serves as the treasurer for the city of Norfolk, and is the first female to lead the office. She was sworn in January 1, 2018. She is a former member of the Virginia General Assembly, representing the 89th House District, which is located entirely in the city of Norfolk and includes approximately 45% of the city's population. She was elected to the Virginia legislature in December of 2012. In the House of Delegates, she served on the Appropriations, Education, and General Laws committees. She was appointed to the Virginia Commission on Youth, Virginia's Joint Commission on Elementary and Secondary Education, Joint Commission on the Future of Higher Education, and the Jamestown-Yorktown Authority. Prior to holding state office, Ms. Hester served as the Norfolk City Council, on the Norfolk City Council from 1996 to 2010, representing the Super Ward 7, a district that includes 50% of Norfolk's voters. She also served as vice mayor between 2004 and 2008. In her service to the citizens of Super Ward 7, she advocated for equal opportunities for all, a vibrant city economy, healthy neighborhoods, and she was a tireless voice for young people. And she's still young. She was instrumental in establishing the first Norfolk Youth Council. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Special Education from Virginia State University, granted cum laude, and a Master of Arts degree in Education and Human Development from George Washington University. She serves as co-chair of Black Women for Positive Change, an international organization that works to change the culture of violence and build the middle class. She is a member of the Virginia State University Alumni Association, Tidewater Chapter, and the National Council of Negro Women, Norfolk Chapter. She is a member of Norfolk Alumni Chapter, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and a partner at Mount Lebanon Missionary Baptist Church, the Mount, Chesapeake, Virginia location. Wow. Welcome. Welcome. I think you're both muted. It was just a joy to read your bios. It really was. Both of you have done a lot, not only for your communities, but as I said earlier, you have no idea of the national impact of what you do, and in some cases, international impact. So that is all applaudable. And I don't want to clap because that'll blow up everything. But anyway, thank you both. And ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to talk about the impact of the midterm elections. And believe me, those elections have said a lot. How do you guys feel about that individually before we get into some heavyweight stuff here?
My spirit is a little calmer
Mhm.
as a result of it. And, looking forward to some more progress over the next couple of years because we need it. So I was pleased it wasn't as bad as some pundits made it out to be. And so I'm in a better space now.
Well, when it comes to Fox News, let's say we're glad it wasn't as good as some folks hoped it would be. But anyway.
And I'm still observing, watching things unfold. I'm happy about what I'm seeing, especially around what appears to be some of the youth turnout. And then from the African-American perspective, we know that whenever Democrats win, it's usually African-Americans and Black women in particular who are at the core of ensuring that victory occurs. But I also believe in accountability and outcomes. So whoever is in power, I think we need to make sure that there's accountability to African-Americans in our agenda and our progress.
Absolutely. I think, and I'm going to really attribute this to a lot of our college students and probably our fraternities and sororities. There was a surprising high turnout among young people that wasn't expected. And I think that was the fear of everybody, that they just wouldn't be activated enough to get out there and go to the polls.
No, I'm still trying to figure out why we didn't expect it, because over the past 3 cycles, they have been coming out. Our young people have been, and so I think older people like myself don't pay attention enough to what's important to young people. But when something is important to them, they're going to put their foot in it and try to make a difference. And I think that's what we've been seeing since 2018. And I really think it's going to continue. And yes, they're going to expect accountability like us. We do expect to be codified into law. And also to make sure that what we expect from our elected leaders occurs. But it's still amazing to me that we're surprised by the passion and commitment of our young people, because we have trained them to be that way. And so I'm just glad to see that now people can see in the numbers, and there's a trend that our young people, I think, are taking our places and doing the things we expect. Now, there's a gap in the middle, yes, that we on. I think young people are stepping up big time.
It seems to be reminiscent to me of the mid to late 1960s, when the young people were active in voter registration, and getting out to vote to try to change the complexion basically of this country, the way this country was going. And I think we're seeing that now. Mr. Jordan, I think you was.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think what's surprising some is not so much the turnout, but I think the proportion, the percentage of the total vote that young people are ending up being, it appears, at least in some locations. So I think that's some of the surprises about the percentage of the vote that's considered youth, not just the turnout itself. But I agree with Ms. Hester that I believe the young people have been motivated and engaged, and even coming out of the pandemic, that might be one reason why we have lost that connection. But where that connection exists and where young people are engaged and where elders are willing to impart and share what our experiences are, I think we show good results like we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I had somewhere in my paperwork here that the numbers of young people 19 to 24 coming out to vote was astounding compared to other age brackets. It's really amazing. So yeah, kudos to our youth. We have to give that to them. One of the I think, or maybe I'm incorrect, and you may correct me if I'm wrong, that perhaps fear was the motivating factor in this election. And I mean, just as Mrs. Hester said earlier, that the pundits were putting this, really making us feel that we were in a precarious position because there has been so much publicity given to the people who are, I won't say nervous, but just, bearers of bad news, or even hopers of bad news. And this is on the wings of 147 Republicans siding with the insurrectionists and voting to overturn the election and the will of the people. I just, about the Democratic Party, I'm gonna jump on this, getting in politics here, but there seemed to be no big brouhaha from the Democratic Party about these 147 people who tacitly supported a coup. And I don't understand why that messaging didn't go out nationally, or at least as strongly as it should have been.
Well, I can start on this one since I'm a Democrat. I still have that, I run as a Democrat, and in both offices, last two offices that I've been elected to, we truly do have a problem with messaging everything. Yes. And I don't understand either why we run away from the facts that are in our face, because everybody should have been saying we had 147 or the number of Republicans who agreed with really taking over the country. And they're still there and going to be. And what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to talk about it and keep it in front of everybody for the next coming around? Because we wait to have a conversation. The conversations need to take place every day and needs to be communicated. And so, you can play nice to try to get the votes that you need, which is a part of it, because I tell constituents all the time, I am but one person. I need to get at least 4 in order to get something done. So there is a part there that I think, of course, we need to help all people understand. But I think the message has to be that these people are still there. And if they could, they would change the course of our country in some kind of legislation. And we can't have that. So that's why we need to codify our voting rights, women's rights, gun rights, everything, make it law. So when it gets to a court, it's already written.
Yeah, one of the things that I didn't see highlighted was that the Republicans, and believe me, I believe in the two-party system, but were the ones who worked to actively gut the voting rights bill of 1965. That's not talked about. That's part of the messaging, and that's serious. That's very, especially down here. Well, we're broadcasting from Georgia. States like Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida,
Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have the laws that we have in Virginia because there was Democrat control, and we were able to put some of those laws in opportunities for people to register to vote on the same day as election day, which is not heard of in Virginia, but it can always be rolled back. So,
Right.
But you're right, that conversation, I think it was had by some, but a public conversation. But I think it got rolled into, in my opinion, when we talked about women's rights and reproductive rights, it got rolled into all rights. So voting rights, who you want to love rights, who you want to marry rights, everything. That once you take one away, you begin to take and can take all the others away. And so I just think the reproductive one was one that stayed out front. But I think that we are wise enough to know, especially the young people are wise enough to pay attention to, all rights could be taken away.
Yeah, especially at in Virginia, the who you want to marry right, because that it wasn't that long ago where you could go to jail for interracial marriages, marriage,
Right.
Or even interracial relationship, significant. So we're not that far away from that, and there are lots of people who would like to see that rolled back.
Just going back a minute to your comment about fear, I think that I don't know if fear is the right word, but I think there are some genuine concerns, because typically, if you look at models, that we know that the midterm election of a initial 4-year term of a president, that you see significant changes. So we saw it during Obama, we saw it during Trump, we see that. And so I think there was some genuine concern about what would be the change in Congress as a result of the midterm election. I do think that Ms. Hester is on point, that these issues that have been nationalized did result in some additional strong turnout. But I also think there's a danger in when issues get nationalized, because what may be the case here in Virginia, or if we get localized down to Norfolk, Virginia, may be very different than what it is for Georgia. And if you get down to Atlanta or any locality in Georgia. So in one sense, I think the nationalization can be a positive, because it can be a way to get the type of messaging out that you all were speaking of earlier. But I think that sometimes people become disillusioned because everything becomes nationalized, and they don't necessarily see how is it impacting me right here where I live when I walk out my house and walk my dog or do whatever it is that I do. So I think if Democrats were wise, in my opinion, they would do a much better job of not only speaking to the national issues, but also speaking to the local issues. And I think that's what Republicans were trying to do as they dealt with crime wherever they wanted to deal with it, or certain issues that they tried to address. And I think the other hidden thing that we all have to address is the gerrymandering. So, politicians being able to choose their voters versus voters choosing the politicians is a big deal. And I'm happy to see that more and more African Americans are willing to not see our districts as compacted as they once were. Because I believe if you go back and look at the congressional elections back in '94, when the whole, whatever they call it, the Republican Revolution that they started, as we allowed our voters to be compacted into overwhelmingly majority Black districts, it allowed for more conservative elected officials to get elected because they no longer needed our vote. But when
Right.
they were in our districts, they had to moderate some of that nonsense in order to get elected. But once you compact us and gerrymander, then people are able to run on this election denial system and able to run on, frankly, some of this white supremacy political philosophy that appears to have reared its head.
I totally agree. I want to almost switch gears here. I'm going to define something for some people that most people don't know because we use titles and we don't define them. And I want to talk about fascism for a minute. And fascism is an authoritarian and national right-wing system of government and social organization. The definition of fascism accurately defines the administration of Donald Trump and all of his followers. So why does America have over 70 million people ignorant of this reality? Perhaps Trump's former counselor, Kellyanne Conway, was accurate when she spoke of alternative facts. And are Republicans living in a bizarro world of alternative facts?
Is that a question?
That's a question. I know it sounds like fact, but
yeah, well, you know, it's I don't know if you got a chance to watch some of David Chappelle's commentary over the weekend.
I recorded it, but I'm going to get into it later.
And I know folks have different opinions on his full commentary, but you know, one of the things he spoke to was being someone who lived in Ohio, that some of that messaging that that was being made, that yes, the system is, for many people believe the system is corrupt. And here you had this authoritative figure who was literally out there saying, talking about Donald Trump, saying, yes, the system is corrupt, and I know the system is corrupt because I use it to my advantage.
Right.
And so we know, as African Americans, we've known. I mean, you know, FBI, COINTELPRO, Tuskegee, you name it. We know how, in one sense, government, as a result of our engagement in leadership, has made things better. But we also know that government also has been used as a weapon to hold us down. And so I think some of that white resentment, as you know, as the economy has become more digital and more technical, and jobs have gone overseas, folks who felt like they had certain privileges, which they do, but they weren't seeing it realized to the degree that they felt that it should be realized. I think that has had an impact on this trend towards, as you described it, you know, fascism. It in many ways is a feeling of lost identity. I'm old enough and young enough to remember when people started streaking after Richard Nixon, and so to me, it's the same type of thing. Then when folks feel like they are no longer in control and dominating, I think you see this tendency to look for folks to blame or excuses outside of themselves rather than looking internally.
Yeah, that's called Machiavellian leadership, where you keep an enemy at the door. You know, that always has, like now, I think it's for the Republicans, it's the Mexicans, you know, which is strange. And then you have, and I never could understand this, and I hope I don't offend people, but there seems to be a great movement among, we'll say, Cubans and some Latin Americans to support the Republican Party. And the Republican Party, the controlling portion of the Republican Party, has no use for you unless you can pass for white. I hate to say that, but that's really the reality. So when you these Latin Americans who come to the United States and they say, oh, you know, we want the Republican Party to support us, we want to support the Republican Party, they're really fighting against their own culture, supporting something that's against them. It's almost like they're all a bunch of Herschel Walkers or something like that. But
if I could jump in, I'm gonna yield to Ms. Hester. But I think in the African American community, we have a cultural, I don't know if you call it conservative, but we the issue of family and culture appeals to us too.
Yes.
And I think where you see Republicans making whatever inroads, I think it has more so to do with the failure of Democrats to speak to the importance of family in culture from a asset-based perspective. And so I think that when you look at, you mentioned Cuban or Latinos or others that move here or have grown up here, there's a strong culture in family. Mm-hmm. And I think in our community, it still exists. And so we find ourselves often attracted to that as well. I think that goes back to the point you all were making earlier about messaging. I think the Democrat Party needs to do a better job of speaking to the importance of family and culture, especially when it deals with communities of color.
Yeah. Ms. Hester.
And I think I was just going to say, I think that our agenda of how we get things done has to address that. And so in supporting our families, what are the things that we need to do so that they can meet their dreams, or access their dreams? And that goes back to education. That goes back to how I get my skills training. Mm-hmm. That goes back to how we have men and women in the household, if that's what they choose to do, whether they're married or not, but the father and the mother, or the two people, however the family is, that I can go to work and I can afford childcare. So those are the things that, the rubber meets the road, with inflation, when they were talking about the economy and all that, prices are going to go up and go down. They always do. Every 10 years, that's just a process. And that's something that we don't teach in school enough so that people understand that that's just the ebb and flow of life. And so you're going to have those things to occur. And in my, we needed to slow down this housing market. Mm-hmm. A part of the boom we had during the Obama time when we were selling and buying. It just flows. And this is where we are right now. So the inflation piece is going to balance itself out. But the family, the education piece, that's why an innovative agenda needs to come out. And that's, in one of the groups that I'm in, Black Women for Positive Change, that's one of the things that we have been working on and working for our next agenda coming up for 2023 is how do we address even the violence? The violence is in all communities because, the riot that we had at the Capitol, that was violence too. So you can't just say that the violence and the crime is in the Black community. It's everywhere. And we need to be able to talk about that, which we don't. When people think crime, they think Black people are doing it all. And that is not the case. And a lot of it is domestic, but a lot of it is too people rising up their ugly heads, to try to take us out and take us down. So we have to provide some of those opportunities for our minority businesses. That's one of Mr. Jordan's thing. We got to figure out how to make them work. People are wondering how come there's so many people who are not applying for all the jobs that are out here. People starting their own businesses. They're trying to figure out other ways to do things. And they've had COVID the past 2 years to see that I'm going to live my life a different way. I'm going to try to make ends meet for my family in a different way. But then we got to figure out how to make sure that they have access to the capital and access to the money that they need and the skill sets. And of course, for me, I can't say anything without talking about children. Our children have to be exposed to a whole lot more.
Yes.
So and they can dream the same way we did. So it has to become a priority. And that's going to be, Mr. Jordan is a school board member. I talk to him all the time about how do we get our children out of that classroom so they can go see something, so they can experience something, so that they can feel it. When you feel it, then you begin to believe it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I really liked about my education coming up, and I came up in the poor part of Philadelphia, but they made sure that we, from elementary all the way through junior high school at least, that we got out and did things to see what the world was about out there. And yeah, that's also a part of the educational process.
I agree 100%. As you're talking, I can just hear my father's voice in my head, because all he would say to me is exposure, exposure, exposure. It's all about exposure. And I think that is absolutely true. Not only do we need to make sure that it's so interesting, as the world has become, quote, closer because of technology, in some ways we also seem to be more isolated. And so I do think we need to find ways of making sure that our children get exposure and get hands-on experiences and see things in action, that one day they will come up with some new invention that will revolutionize the world. So I do think that exposure is critically important.
Yeah, and I think they're trying to, at least I heard this from Biden, they really want to lower the ages of children. I guess it's lowering the mandatory age for school. They want to lower it from 5 to 3 years old, because they figure that would benefit children more than the system that we have now. So that would be huge. I can tell you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Rodney, you want that? Because I totally agree. One, if we get them in school at the age of 3, all children, no matter what their background, will be able to do a better job, even though we still have the issues of finding teachers and support staff for them, because that's a challenge in our world today. But yes, it will make a difference for parents who want to go work. You know, if your child is in school, full day program, then they're able to do and meet some of their goals, so they can go to training or go to classes and work and do both. So how we've set up the system, we've got to change the system so that people can take advantage of those. And I do hope that we're able to get money that we can send to schools, districts, so that they can start, say, three pre-K programs.
Yeah, well, I'm a big advocate for universal pre-K, mixed income pre-K, more opportunities. I'd like to see even more families take advantage of the opportunities that currently exist. I think we saw, as a result of the closing part of the pandemic, we saw enrollments drop. We're now starting to see those enrollments come back, and that's not just in Norfolk, but across the country. I have to give some more thought about to what extent it should be mandatory. I do think we need the resources to provide it. The only thing that I have a libertarian streak, just want you all to know that. The only thing that I have a little hesitancy about government mandates is government mandates. And so, if they're going to mandate something and then fund it, then I'm all for it. But too often, and this is from both parties, we have these mandates that are placed on school systems that are underfunded. And then the burden comes on the school system and the locality to try to close the gap. So I'm definitely in support of having learning start as early as an age as possible, but it must be funded, and it must be sustained, and it must be equitable, and it needs to have some cultural competencies and other foundations that we need to make sure. So we're not just putting more children through a system that we say is not adequately serving children of color. We've got to be parallel. We've got to continue to make the system relevant for all children, while at the same time considering any mandates that would send more children to that system.
I hear that we got a comment here that some school systems are eliminating kindergarten, and that's
it's sad,
scary.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Some of that has to do with funding.
Right.
Funding and finding teachers, and it's hard to be an educator now. And so, because things are so different and we need more, but a lot of things have to do with funding that they just can't afford to pay the teachers. So what's that going to do for families? What's that going to do for educational beginnings? And what families is that impacting primarily?
Yeah, it's
If you look at the data, you're going to see is children of color, or
Yeah.
local children. So
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's devastating. And, personally, I think because the education profession has been considered female dominated, that it's always been undervalued when it comes to compensation. But I think we need to not only address it on the compensation side, but also on the esteem. You and all of us on this call right now, we know that historically, who was more valued in the community than a teacher? And I think we need to find our way back to valuing teachers and the role that teachers play, not just on the compensation side, but just in the esteem and the values and expectations, that we have. We all tell the stories. I can share my own. Even with my own children, they knew and they still know that if something happened in the classroom, I was going to side with the teacher first. My children were going to have to prove to me that the teacher was wrong. It wasn't the other way around. And I think we need to find some ways of rebuilding that respect for the profession and what our expectations are for our children as they engage in the public education system.
I agree. I think we're all in agreement of that. And it's amazing that we all probably came from school systems that didn't have all of the advantages that the children have, that some of them have today, the ones that are funded properly. I go back to my own education. We talk about funding. Fact, in my elementary school, when you had books, people would write their names in the books. I was reading books that were used by people my father's age when they were in school. Some of the names were people of my adult neighbors in these books, and we had to reuse the books while the kids in the other part of the city were getting brand new books. And it's been a problem in this country ever since this country's been a country. So yeah,
And
that's something that really needs to be addressed.
And that's another reason that we have to hold these, re-elected, elected people.
Yeah.
We've got to make sure that they are the things that we know will make a difference and that they said they wanted to do to make a difference for us. And so, the deficit is already high. So, okay, whatever. But we need to do what we have to do for our families.
Don't get me talking about that deficit, because it's funny that, and I'll be real quick because we got a question about charter schools versus public schools. But when it comes to the national deficit, it always decreased under Democratic presidents, but we're called, the Democratic Party is known as the spenders, which is crazy, because I remember under Clinton, the country came out with its first surplus at the end of his administration, and then Bush put us right back into debt again, and then we went into almost a depression, and Obama took over, kept us from going into depression. We had the Great Recession, but he brought the country out of that. Then we get the next president in, Trump, and we're giving big tax breaks to the big corporations, and we're back into a recession, a deep recession. It's crazy the way that poor messaging goes out. But we have a question about charter schools versus public schools.
What's the question?
That's the question.
Well, so let me say this. Going back to what's nationalized and what's localized. So charter school laws can vary from state to state. So in Virginia, we have our charter school law is considered, at least from a charter school advocate's perspective, is considered a weak charter school law. So, but in Virginia, charter schools are considered public schools. There are other states where the charter school is independent and is privatized. So I have two nieces and two nephews. They attended schools in Washington, D.C. At least a couple of them, attended charters. But it was really more around what charter schools were. Charter schools were originally a progressive idea about trying to provide innovative techniques to address the needs of children. So I am not for charter schools that drain resources from the public school system. I'm not for charter schools that result in increased segregation and concentration of poverty. But I do think that we need to be much more willing to have innovation and address the individualized needs of children. And if charter schools provides a framework for more culturally relevant education, if it provides more ability to have smaller class sizes and allow for innovation, I'm not anti those type of charters. So I do think that my own personal philosophy is that our African-American experience in this country has always been about innovation and creativity. And I think if we provide the leadership for the country, and if we provide the leadership in education, we can use and leverage charter schools or any other type of education policy to the benefit of our children. But I am a strong public schools advocate, and I do not want to see the public school system underfunded or demolished, caught up in this charter school versus public school debate.
I agree. I could talk about that a long time from personal experience. But Ms. Hester, I know that just by your sorority association, that that the Deltas are heavily involved in educational initiatives as far as supporting educators, and even, if I'm correct, recruiting educators, or am I incorrect on that?
Well, I'll just say a lot of us are educators.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as recruiting, we don't necessarily recruit. We do support schools and have initiatives that support young people who are of school age. And that's certainly our middle and high school girls and boys, to try to help them to be more successful, more confident, just in life and in their walk. So, but I agree. I do agree with Rodney. I was just going to say ditto to what he said.
Mm-hmm.
I always wanted to start my own charter school because I just wanted to do it my way. And I've run 2 alternative schools, and even in the alternative schools, they were the children who were long-term suspended, expelled, and what have you, that they just needed an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so my children, because they're all mine, but they were able to be successful because we found out what their needs were, what their hurts were, and tried to help them work through it so that they could get a diploma, so that they could go out and be successful. Those kind of things I want to happen in the public school, because that is the way it was,
Mm-hmm.
because it was necessary. Our challenges for our children and families are different than when I was in the classroom. And so we have to readjust how we work with our children. And it's just so hard when you're trying to teach them. You got to do the standards of learning. Sometimes I just want to, for the next couple of years, just throw standards of learning out. We already, everybody's behind 2 years. Okay, I know you don't want to do that, Rodney, because you got to have some data. You got to have data.
They have standards, but we don't have to teach to the test.
Right.
Correct. Which means you can't take them out of the classroom because you got to teach so much to the test. So you can't take them on a field trip so they can experience other things so that they can dream. But we do have to change how we're doing education. And then, there's just so many innovative things out here now. We've got to our children need to be designing, because, we design and develop things. People going to be living in space, going up to space like they, get on a plane and go somewhere else. Well, our children need to be designing these spaces, programming, or whatever it is that's going to be needed or necessary for things like that. I don't know that we're there, and maybe I'm too far off the ledge. But when you can see what the future is that's coming, then we've got to have our children thinking about it. And when you're 3 years old and you plan on that thing already, you know more than I do, and I can ask you how to help me do something as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, then they're way beyond where we were.
Yeah. Our children are far smarter than we were,
Right.
and get exposed to opportunities far greater than we did. And I think as adults and elders, we have to find ways of spurring that creativity and innovation and not stifle it. But I agree. I think that's where it starts. And so I don't know if I answered the question about the whole charter school thing. We cannot underfund and destroy our public education system. It is really the one kind of democratic institution in theory that we have in this country. And as we talked about the January 6th, we should be investing in how do we strengthen and grow our democratic institutions, not how do we tear them down.
Yes, and it's going to lead me back into a couple of questions that I have going back into the political area. This is probably close to both of you. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin was elected in 2021 and described himself by many pundits as a regular Republican. Former President Trump used a racist insult to describe him. Yet Youngkin has endorsed several extreme right-wing Republicans, such as Kari Lake of Arizona. These extremists are supporters of Donald Trump and are election deniers. Now, what does that mean for our country? I know that comes from out of left field after we talked about education, but
yeah, well, you brought us back to where we were, because we were at one point talking about the elections and the results of the election. So we'll have over 100 and some election deniers who were elected into office. So, so that's one thing that we already know. They're there, but at all levels, not just at the federal level. They're at the state level, local levels, and at the school board level. It happened even here in Hampton Roads, in our area where we are. So we know in a couple of our cities, the dynamics are going to change tremendously because of Youngkin's parents' rights. Parents have always had rights, y'all. Excuse me. Because you just needed to be involved and go up there and talk to your teachers. The curriculum has always been public, and what you read and what you have to do. And if you're paying attention to your children's homework, you know what they were working on. So, but they made this a talking point, and now it is an issue. So for the naysayers who he supported, most of them lost. Once he went out there, he was just trying to get his name out there. So we all know that, realize that. And, he's going to be gone when his time is up, and he shan't come back. And what the country will do with him, they're going to have to decide that. But you would know my opinion that he would not be the leader that our country would need as a Republican, whether he's a normal Republican or regular Republican or not. So I don't know what a regular Republican is nowadays. I don't think they know what they are. So I think that that's kind of hard for them to be able to describe.
Yeah, I'll just add that in Virginia, going back to something we said earlier, I actually think that Terry McAuliffe blew the election in Virginia. I think his failure to support African-American women who were prepared to step up and become governor and lieutenant governor was a huge mistake. And then in his debate, when talking about parents and education, I think he stepped in it, and Youngkin leveraged it. So again, I think when African-Americans, Democrats, progressives, the coalition, when it stands on its principles, I think we win. When we are constantly in the defensive and oftentimes try to behave like those that we criticize, it seems to always work to our detriment. But this parent movement is nothing new. We saw it during desegregation. We saw it during busing. We see it over and over and over again. And I just think that we have to be as supportive and engaged with all parents, and not just falling into the trap of thinking that some parents get the opportunity to set public policy and other parents are supposed to sit on the sideline and take it. At the end of the day, we need to keep our grassroots voter engagement moving forward. And we can't just wait from election to election to do it. We have to do the work. And personally, I think young people who are far more accepting and engaged than we are, we just need to give them the supports that they need. And I think they will help lead us.
And I just, because I know you're going to have to stop us in a few minutes. I just want to say for all the listeners, wherever they are, your engagement and involvement in your community at the local, state, and federal level is important. And I tell people all the time, whoever is your elected representative, you need to have their phone number and have access to them. They need to know your face. And when you call, they need to know that it's you calling, and they need to call you back. So I'm just telling all listeners, as an elected person who has been there, done that, and is still doing it, people need to be able to reach out to you, know that you're going to respond to them, trust that you're going to try to work hard for them, and let you know when they need you to come up, show out, and let others know, so that you can get the votes that you need to make something happen. We've got to do this at all levels, all across this country, to continue to make a difference. Because as people of color, as a Black woman, I'm trying to make a difference for everybody. Yes, I want to lift the lives of Black children and Black families, but I want everybody to have a better way of life. So you got to do the work in your own neighborhood, in your own city where you live.
Yeah,
A
and
rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah, and
Yes,
I'll just say
indeed.
reward people that work. Let's not get caught up in celebrity culture. That'll be my last comment on that.
Oh, that's great. Guys, it's Mr. Jordan and Ms. Hester. It's been great having you here with us today. Your insight, I'm sure your insights have been important to our listeners and viewers. I think it will make a difference in the thinking of many, many people. And so glad to have you. I hope we can have you both back here again on WCEG. I really do appreciate having you both here, and thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you for having us.
I just want to close out, folks, by letting my Georgia viewers know, and maybe some other states too, that we're in the midst of election runoff, and it's very important that you vote sometime between, I think the first day of voting is next week, and of course the actual voting day, the closing voting day, is December the 6th, and we have a lot to vote for. Just some questions I'd like to pose to you in the next couple of minutes. And that's, I need you to think about who you're voting for and why you're voting. And I just want to know, how do you support a political party that insists that its state government leaders not accept $3.5 billion per year in Medicaid funding simply because the program is part of the legacy of an African-American president? There is no other reason. Meanwhile, hospitals in Georgia are closing. Urban and rural Georgians of all races are being denied access to proper health care. That's dumb. And that's a Republican initiative, but I'm not going to let the Democrats get off the hook. You, Democrats, you need to be more in tune with what's going on with your constituencies. A lot of you are stuck on views that are antiquated, and your party is suffering, the people are suffering, and they don't feel as if they're being listened to. This is not all Democrats, but there's enough of you that you really need to check yourself. Now, here in Georgia, I have interviewed many Democratic candidates who are quick to talk about reparations for descendants of slaves. Firstly, how do you accurately identify those descendants, and who pays for the reparations? Do you say the government? Because that's the dumbest answer possible. The government is of, by, and for the people. Therefore, we are the government. We would be paying our reparations to ourselves. That's dumb. But here in Georgia, and we've been on the subject of education, and I'm seeming like I'm the only person talking about this, is that we had a huge scandal, education scandal here in the metropolitan Atlanta area, and not one politician is addressing that. And you're talking about reparations. Who is paying reparations to these undereducated children who were passed through the system, allowed to graduate and go out into a world unprepared because some teachers and some administrators were more interested in financial and status gain than they were in educating our children. I don't know why people aren't talking about that, particularly Democrats. It irritates me to no end. And why am I the only one talking about that? That, my friends, is a problem. Because what we have is crime in the classroom perpetrated by administrators and teachers. Sadly, most of them are African American, and I think that's why they're getting off the hook, because the people in power here in metropolitan Atlanta don't want to do that. But anyway, back to the runoff election. It's coming up. I'm going to have a program in 2 weeks, and I'm going to talk about this runoff election. Most of you don't know that the whole system of runoff elections has everything to do with racism, Yet not one politician in Georgia is talking about that. Not one. African American, white, anybody, Democrat, Republican, nobody. It has a racist beginning, and you're not talking about it. And that's why we're stuck with a runoff election now, when we did have one candidate who won more, had more votes than the other, but now we're going to have a runoff. But anyway, I'm out of time. It's been great. I really enjoyed my guests, all of their information. I enjoyed the conversation on education, which I didn't think we would be getting into, but we got into it extensively. And I hope folks were listening and paying attention, because these are educators that were on this program. These people are educators, and they're vested in the education of our children and uplifting not just our children, but all children. As I said earlier, rising tide raises all ships, So I thank you all for participating in the program. My guests really want to give you a hand. And I thank you all who are listening. I will see you in 2 weeks on 11/24/2022, and we're going to get into some more issues and answers on the WCEG network. Thank you and good day.